Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Monthly Dev. Thank you all for coming. And today we have a special edition for you. We have a GitHub Star edition. All of the speakers today are GitHub Stars, and we are all very excited to get it ready and get it started. So what is the Monthly Dev? The Monthly Dev is obviously a series of monthly events where we gather around, we bring web developers, DevOps developers, architecture, and we talk about all the things that are interested. And obviously it's free, and we welcome everyone to join to this awesome line of events. Today, we have a special lineup for you. We have Debbie O'Brien from bit.dev that will start by showing us how to build components in Harmony. Then we have Liran from Snyk, who is going to show us how to build communities around open source and how to make them successful. So I'm sure you can't wait to get it started, but before that, you already know that we have our swag raffle. And today we are going to send out some socks and hats just to get you ready for Christmas. I know it's a little bit early, but it's better to get started and get the swag all ready for you. So all you have to do in order to join the raffle is to share out the event on social media, take out the YouTube link, make sure to add the Monthly Dev hashtag to the post, and we will pick the 10 most creative shares, and we will send you, as I mentioned, socks and hats. Just make sure to keep your DMs open so we can contact you when the time is come if you win. So I motivate you to go ahead now and go to Twitter, share it, and come back to us. And without further ado, let's start with our first talk for today. Our first speaker is the head of developer advocate at Bit, and she is also a GitHub star and a GDE. So please welcome on board Debbie O'Brien.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you all here. So I have the chat open and I can see everyone. So I can see Alba's there. I can see a couple of friendly faces. I can see you all. Thanks so much for having me here, Ido.
Thank you so much for coming. And please, everyone, keep the comments coming. Debbie would love to get your question answered. We have tons of time to get everyone satisfied. So write down every question you ask, and we will moderate everything after the talk. So Debbie, the stage is yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, so building components in Harmony. So basically, you all know, hang on, let's just make sure this is working. It's not actually changing the slides for me. Typical. Are they changing? No, they're not changing. Tech problems. I've got some tech problems. There we go. I've got it. I just have 3 screens. So I was on the chat for YouTube at the same time. That's what you get for trying to answer questions before you do your talk. So yes, my name is Debbie O'Brien. I'm head developer advocate at Bit, a GitHub star, a Nux ambassador, OutZero ambassador, Microsoft most valuable professional, Cloudinary media developer expert, and Google developer expert. And you can follow me, Twitter, Debs_O'Brien. And this is one of my favorite pictures because this was when real life was real, you know, when we actually traveled and went to places. And this is actually me working from a cruise ship on the way to Antarctica, where I gave a talk in Antarctica waters, which was amazing. Best time ever. And then COVID happened and all went downhill from there. But there you go. Anyway, let's hope we can do things like that very soon. So what am I going to cover today? Feature ownership. I want to talk about how different teams can manage different scopes. I want to talk about reusability, how we should build, thinking about scalability, thinking about reusability. So about design systems, like design teams should own the design components and, you know, basically have them separate. And we want to think components first, how we should focus on more than one possible end product and not just build thinking about apps all the time. So let's talk about my dad. My dad's a carpenter. I love my dad. He's great. He builds amazing furniture. This is what he built, actually. This is an amazing bookshelf, and it's like, you know, fitted there from that door to that window. You know, he does amazing stuff. He's great. And me, I'm a developer. I build websites for my dad. So yeah, this is a website I built. I'm so proud of this. I know it looks terrible, but I'm so proud of it because it was one of my first websites, and I literally just took it offline recently because my dad retired. That's what happens, and it's pretty old, and it's not responsive, and it's not very good. But anyway, I was proud of it back then. But yes, so what's the problem? I mean, my dad's a great carpenter. I'm a great developer. So there's no problem, right? Or is there a problem? Do we have a problem? We have a problem. The problem is that, everything is made to measure. Like my dad builds that furniture, like for that one house only. You can't take that out and put it in another house. It would just like break, right? So it's literally made to measure. And my website was made to measure. I made that website for my dad. You could no way take that component out and put it somewhere else. It just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't work. And that means that it's not scalable and it's not reusable. And, components then have no value outside of the app because you're building that component in that one app. And then when that app, you want to share it somewhere else, you can't, and it's kind of problematic. So yeah, it's just not good. So what's the solution? There's always a solution. I have the solution for you. Are you ready for the solution? IKEA, of course. I mean, IKEA is always a solution to all your problems. Who bought furniture during lockdown? Yeah, I mean, we all did. But no, seriously, IKEA is the answer to your problems because IKEA thinks in components. If you ever bought furniture from IKEA, you get a box with 1 million pieces in it. You got to put all those components together. And that's what we want to do when we build our websites. So the solution, we want to think about not one end product. We want to think towards more than one end product. And we want to think like scalability, reusability by building a component model. And that's what IKEA do. They kind of build all these components so that then they can build lots of different types of furniture so that you can just like buy loads of furniture and change your furniture all the time. That's how they make their money. Very clever. And yeah, what exactly is a component? I mean, we all know what a component is, right? And if you were to ask, what is it? It's a part of a larger whole. It's a piece. It's a bit. How'd you get that bit? It's an element. It's a unit, right? And basically in web developer terms, it's a button, right? A primary button. That's a component. Now, a component can be as small as a button or can be as big as an application. An application is also a component. And everything in between that, they're all components. So everything is a component. And the same in IKEA, that one shelf is a component, but also the little screws are components. The door is a component. They're all components. So yeah, a component is not just a React, a Vue, an Angular, a Svelte component. A component could be a UI primitive, a service, a micro front end, a backend service, middlewares, entity components, serverless functions, applications even. Everything is a component. So yeah, why should teams own features? Good question. So basically, you want a team to own a feature because, imagine like the e-commerce team, right? If I'm an e-commerce team, I want to master e-commerce, right? I don't want to have to build base UI components. I don't want to have to worry about design systems. I want to build e-commerce stuff. I want to build shopping cart features. I want to build product card stuff. I want to build that hardcore stuff. And I want to own it. I want to publish my component when my component is ready. I don't want to have to talk to the design team and say, are you ready to publish that component? Because I'm ready to publish mine. Can we publish now? No, I want to own it and I want to be autonomous. And, I want to communicate with that team, but through an API. So if the design team has created this amazing button that I want to use, I want to know what API, what props are available to me so I can then use that component very easily. And then basically we have a separation of concerns. So we want to build together, but completely independent, right? We want to build, the end goal is the same, but we want to stay independent and then just master what we actually are good at. So this is an example here. We have the catalog team. They're over in Australia. And we've got the infra team. They're over in New York. They work. One's working in nighttime. One's working in the daytime. They literally never see each other. And it's not a problem because they're responsible for different things. And, the catalog team are responsible for those hotel components, the feature card, the card content. And the infrared team, they're responsible for those base components, the other components that are used to build up the application. And that application is built made up of those from different teams all pieced together. And the final product is basically one website with, components from different teams working separately, independently, different repos, different scopes, different countries, different time zones, different everything. So IKEA does the same. They've got Billy and Oxberg used to make this beautiful component, this beautiful furniture, and Besta and Eckert, they work together to build this one. So why should components be reusable? Great question. So obviously, we want to reduce duplicated code. How many buttons have you created in your life? How many buttons are you maintaining right now? Seriously, right? How many websites do you own that has like product cards, 27 product cards, 50 buttons, etc., etc.? That's like to maintain that is a nightmare. we want to basically have faster development, and having faster development means having those components that can be reused. So then you're just like piecing things together to make that application, that website, or whatever. And sharing is caring. I mean, come on, we all love each other these days, so we need to be sharing. So yeah, this is a reusable component. We've got a search component here, and you can see that that search component is being used on one application here and also on another one. And it looks completely different, so it doesn't look the same. That's totally cool. It doesn't have to look the same, but it will act the same. It's built to perform in a certain way, and everything that that component has is shared between those two applications. That React hooked, for example, would be shared between it. The button is another one, right? You've got the pause button here and the read more button. So those button components are reused across different applications. So you can have like different looks and feels, or you can have the same look and feel across the application, depending on what you want. So IKEA do the same, right? I built this in a little simulator in IKEA. It's beautiful, isn't it? So you can actually take the piece of furniture and you can put a white shelf there, a brown shelf, and you can like make a mess. It looks actually pretty ugly. Actually, now that I look at it, it looks really ugly. So yeah, you can basically do what you want, but you can piece those components together once they fit into the right spaces. So why should components be themable? I mean, obviously it kind of makes sense, right? I think you know the answer to it. It's easier to reuse, right? If I want that button component, I don't want that button component. The designer made it, you know, purple, for example. Yeah, but that's great because purple is my color. But I might want to create another application that doesn't use a purple button, and I should be able to modify that with a theme and use my theme to use that button, but use it differently. So one component, many options. And we want to be able to easily change our branding. Now you might say, but do we really change our branding? Yeah, like companies are changing their branding all the time, and they're changing it for cool reasons, like, you know, festive holidays or to support stuff. So sometimes they're just changing it just to be like cool. But also what's very cool right now is dark mode. Yeah, everyone wants dark mode. So you want a dark mode, you want a light mode. Think about accessibility. Let's do a high contrast mode. And now we might have multiple brands. So you might have a brand, and then you might have like a brand specific for students, or a brand specific for open source, or a brand specific for whatever. So once your components are themable, you can reuse those components across any application. They will look different, but they will perform the same. So this is an example here of a button component. We've got like version 1.2. It started off with this kind of like white with the kind of like circular line. And then it went into like black color, and then it went to green color, right? And the application here is using that green button. They've updated to version 2 of the button, which is green. Now, this is the great thing that you can do in Bit, right? You can actually choose which version of the component you want to use. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, you might have like 12 different applications going at the same time. And you've got different teams, right? And remember, you got a team in America, you got a team in Australia, you got a team in Europe, you got a team that's all over the place. And they might not be ready to update to that new version of that green button because they might not have updated the other components. Their e-commerce components might still be black and not green. So they want to wait until they're ready. So that's okay. They can actually install the version that they want. And when they're ready to update to the new version and to their color scheme, etc., then they can take in the new button. So there's loads of kind of really cool things that you can do. So yeah, IKEA does the same, right? They've got like those different colors, and you can choose those different colors, and then, you know, just make what you want. Great. So how do we discover components? This is really, really important, right? You have all these components. Imagine you had like 200 components, 1,000 components, 500 components. I don't know how many components, but you have a lot of components. How do you discover them? This is always like the hardest thing. But if you share your components to the cloud, and I'll show you a little bit about how bit.dev works, but you know, Bit is open source, so you could share them to NPM. It's kind of a disaster to try and find them in NPM. I will be honest. I put components there and I can't find them. But yeah, seriously, you could self-host these as well. And you can do whatever you want, right? But putting them into the cloud, it gives you a very, very easy way to discover your components. Also, if you make it public, you can make it open source, and you can share it with the world for free, which is also really nice. Naming your components correctly is also important. So if you have a product card, for example, you might want to call it product card. But if it was a product card that specifically will only accept like sizes and, you know, specifically made for shoes, maybe it should just be called a shoe product card. And then that's easier to find. If you want to find something to do with the product shoes, you might find that easier. So organizing your components as well into different scopes. Like I'm probably not going to look in the design scope for a shoe product card, right? I might look in the e-commerce one because that's specifically more to e-commerce. So just like organizing your components into the different kind of scopes makes things a lot easier to find. And labeling, of course, you might want to label the component as, you know, this is specific for shoes, this is a product card, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can put those labels, and then they're easy to find. So this is what it looks like on bit.dev, right? So these are my components. This is just a demo project I built. And I've got like an image grid component, an image. This is an environment component there. Then there's a card component, a heading, a link, text. I've got a load of different components going on here. As you can see, I've even got a component generator created as a component that I can share with different applications, so everyone can generate the components the way I want them to generate it, because I like having control. No, seriously. But they can generate it with like a specific styling, etc. I've got a Figma embed component. That's a component. What? Yeah. So I can embed my Figma design, and that component will allow me to do that so that we'll all look the same. It will look beautiful. And these are the components. So I can basically search through these components very easily, find the component I want, then look at the component, inspect that component, see what's going on, see if it is exactly what I want, and then decide if I want to use it or not. Now, we'll go into a little bit more about this, but just like, yeah, take a look at this. It's cool, right? So it makes it a lot easier to find your components. IKEA do the same, right? They give you like all these kind of different variants, so you can see the different variants of this component, so you know which one you want to buy. So how do we improve the consumer's dev experience? Dev experience is extremely important, right? I am a developer. I don't have time to waste. I really don't have time. I just want to like be able to find things, be able to use things, and I want the dev experience to be really amazing. So when we actually build a component, we need to think about this. We need to think about how the component will be used, what API to build for the component, what how someone else is going to use that component. For example, if I had a product card which had available colors, so this shoe is available in green, blue, and red, for example, and maybe I want to share that component and use it, and maybe I don't want those available colors on headphones. Well, headphones has colors. Perfume doesn't have colors. So it might not make sense to then use that card. So I've got to think about, do my available colors need to be a required prop, or should I make that optional and then someone can choose to use that or not? So just thinking about things makes things a lot better. Documenting your components as well, right? If I don't tell you that all you need to do is put an array of colors in there and you get this beautiful component that shows the available colors, if I don't tell you that, you'll probably not know that. So documenting is really important. So it shows you how to use these components. Creating compositions. Compositions, if you've ever used Storybook, it's like stories, right? So your compositions are your ways of seeing your component in different states. So you want to be able to create those compositions and show the like consumer the different ways of using your components. One with the available colors, for example, another without it, one with a price. Maybe there's no price on the product card. I don't know why you wouldn't want a price, but maybe you do. I don't know. But yeah, you basically create the different compositions so users can easily see it. Tests as a documentation feature. You want to be able to read your tests and kind of see the tests and basically understand what the component does from the tests. Now you might be saying, what do you mean read your tests? Well, we can show you the tests in the UI, and I'll show you that later. So you can actually just read through the tests right there in the actual component. Kind of cool, without even like doing anything. Huh, nice. Yeah, and a live component playground. This is really cool. So if you have a live playground, you can actually basically see, so imagine my available colors. I could put red, green, and blue, and I could change that. And imagine I put like 12 colors in there because I want to see how the component would respond to multiple lines and how it would break over multiple lines. And you can test that out live before you even install the component and use that component. And that's kind of really cool feature because you can play around with it. So yeah, this is what it looks like. So at the very top here is my Figma embed. So this is what my designer gave me. This is the Figma design. And I can actually click on that link there where it says button edited a month ago, and it will actually open directly the Figma file. So it means I have direct access to the Figma files because I can never find anything in Figma. The designer puts them like, I don't know. So clicking that button and just opening and going directly there is, oh, it's amazing. So yeah, from here, like as if I was a product manager, I would come along here and say, okay, this is my design. We've got some compositions going on here. Primary button looks okay. Primary button disabled, looks okay. Secondary button, looks okay. Secondary button disabled, looks okay. White button, hello, what's going on here, developer? Like white button does not look like the design, right? And this is how you can easily kind of see and how even the designer can kind of pick up and say, hey, look, you're missing something here. But if I actually look at the properties that this component has, I've got a button text as a string, right? And then I've got a variation of primary or secondary. Now, if I was to actually do this better, I probably could have put in another variation there of white, right? Because my designer gave me 3 variations. So maybe my props could have 3 variations. And then if I had a white variation, I could just, add that variation of white, and it would add that white background with maybe the primary color as the front color, etc. So this is how you can kind of like, build your API based on your design, see everything together, build your compositions, and have it actually, have everyone see it up front. So yeah, IKEA do the same. They basically have their product size, they've got their width, their depth, their height, and they have it all there. So you can see how big that furniture is or how small it is before you buy it, so you know if it's going to fit in the right place. So this is the product card grid I built in the e-commerce in LearnBit React. And basically, yeah, this is my product card for my sports shoes. And it's basically got no available colors here because it's all multicolors, right? So I didn't want that component, so I didn't add that one in here. And basically you can see how I can see the composition of it. But I also have product card grid too. And if I was to click on that, that would show the shoe store with the colors, and product card 3 could show something else. And you can kind of see how it would act basically kind of like in different ways. And this is kind of cool, right? So this is how everything is being built. So you can see, you might be going, oh my God, what's going on here? Right, so at the very top, I've got Learn Bit React. So that's my base UI components. They're my simple components that I'm using, my button, my text, components that are like going to be used across like most applications. So it's kind of like my design system or component library in a way. And then I've got my e-commerce team. My e-commerce team are responsible for building things to do with e-commerce, product cards, shopping cart, any kind of like, price component, things to do with making money. They're going to own those components, but they're going to use the components from the base UI. So the product card is using, the button component. The product card is using the title component. So they're made up of those. And then they're basically filtering down to the 4 applications that I have built. I built a perfume store, sports store, shoe store, and electronics store. And those 4 stores were very easy. I was very easily able to create because I had all those components from e-commerce. I was just able to like pull them down, install them, and use them across those applications. The shoe store, if you actually go to that product and check it out, the shoe store actually has its own product card. I went a bit crazy there and I put extra stuff in, and that is owned by the specific shoe store because they don't want to share it with anyone else because that's theirs. And that's also cool. You don't have to share everything. You want to sometimes have very specific components, and that's great too. So yeah, this is how everything is shared. They're all built in different repos, and you'll see that on GitHub, and that's how it works. So you can also check your component, and you want to see like your product card grid here. You can see it at the bottom, and that's made up of the product card, right? The product card fits in the grid, and that's using the entity component of the product that goes and, does all my types and gets my mocked products. And basically it's like the entity that can then be shared with the backend to make sure, we're not going to fight over, you told me it was a string and now you changed your number and now it's all broken. You broke my app. How many times have you fought with the backend? I fight with them all the time. So yeah, having the entity component there that you can share with them so you can have that kind of like contract between each other. And you can see that product card is then made up of those other components. You'll see over to one side, you've got the e-commerce scope that's using product. It's using the price and the available colors that's specific to the e-commerce. And the rest of them are all made up of like the base components, the heading, the card, the image. They're components that are being reused across those. And you can see what version is being used of each component. So it's really easy for you to look at a component and say, oh, why did you use that component? You should use this component. Or why didn't you update it to that component, like, et cetera, et cetera. So how should we reuse our components, right? We've got all these components. We want to reuse them. So we want to think about components as services, right? I've got a component. I want it to be a service so you can use it. So I want to build a component thinking of it as a service. And you want to integrate components together to form concrete components. So you saw that product card component is built of those, like all those smaller components. And that's how you want to build things so that they can basically easily be reused. And you want to share components for other teams to use. If I keep all those components to myself, it's great. I'm going to move forward. I'll probably get a pay rise and the other team won't. No, come on. If you share your components across your enterprise, across your team, everyone's going to get a pay rise. Be much better. And like, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't need to create a button component again. Every team does not have to have their own button components. Seriously, I promise you. So yeah, basically like just how I showed you earlier, your different teams have different components and they're all basically being used to build up that website. And you can actually go to the BitDev website, or you can go to the project, a demo project that I created, and you can actually use the highlighter tool. And you can highlight over every single one of these, and you can see where they're all coming from. So you can see how it's actually built as well. So just like IKEA, right? They build theirs with basically, smaller components that they share across all their products. And, if you've ever bought anything from IKEA, you always get that little brown wooden thing. They come in everything. I think even if like you don't need them, they just come in a packet. I've got millions in my house. So yeah, and this is the furniture I bought from IKEA, and you can see it's built with components. That black door, I could actually take that out, change it, and put in a flat, one, or put in a white door. I don't have to like basically just rebuild everything from the start, and that's basically what we're trying to achieve. So how do we trust our components, right? We've got another team building components. How do I know, like, are they good developers? I've never even met them. They're working on the other side of the world. I don't know them. They might be terrible developers, and now my beautiful component is going to be like ruined because they're going to break terrible. How can we trust them? So obviously we trust them by creating tests. Now I know we don't have time to make tests. You don't like making tests. I know, I get it. Tests are really important. If you make tests at the start, it's really, really important because basically once you have tests, you cannot export a version into Bit without the test passing. So if you do have failed tests, that developer is not going to be able to export that component. So the components that are exported are actually are actually tested. And also you can actually see the tests in the UI, and I'll show you that in a minute. So you can actually just click and say, hey, you didn't write any tests, I'm not using that component. And then you can like have a fight with the developer. No, seriously. So yeah, making the test easily available. And simulations, you want to like, show that component. And you can also like test dependence. So you could like bring in that component and test its dependence, see what it looks like before you update to another version of it, check it out. And then you can just like export it, eject it out of your workspace and say, no, it doesn't live there, but I just wanted to bring it in, test it out, check it out, see what it looks like, eject. So you can do those kind of cool things as well. So yeah, this is the test, right? So I can see like this button component, it should render secondary, it should pass class name, it should use variation HTML attribute. Very simple test, but from that I can kind of see what's going on with that component. And this is live in the UI, so I can click on the overview, the compositions, the test dependencies, and I can check those all together. Just like in IKEA, right? If they want to test their furniture, they build it, they put it in the shop, you go to the shop, you open the door, you close the door, and you see that it works, right? Simple. So how do we think about component compositions, right? We want to build component compositions. How do we need to think about these? Think about props. We need to think about state. We need to think about routing. We need to think about styling. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're building those compositions. It's really important to think about it before you build it. So for example, my shoes card has a button text, a price, a source, an alt, a text, a title, a size, available colors. Now I made the available colors required. Maybe that component, maybe they want to use it for some shoe store that doesn't have different color shoes for whatever reason, and they might not want to have that as a required prop. So like there are things to think about, like is someone going to always want to have those available colors? That's that like blue dot and black dot at the very top of that card. So yeah, there are things you can think about when you're creating the card. Just like, when IKEA build a hinge, for example, they've got to communicate to the people that are building the doors and say, hey, you got to like make that circle because, this hinge is going to go in there. And I need like 3 dots screwed in there so like those screws can go in. So you got to like think about these and communicate your APIs to each other. So why should we think in components? Seriously, why should we think of components? I mean, if I haven't convinced you already, oh my God, I've done a terrible job. I'll have to keep going. So to build scalable products, you could build micro front ends, reuse components across various apps and repos, deliver faster in the long term. But really because we want to develop in harmony, right? We want to all develop together and, we want to all like aim to deliver something amazing. And we want to do that together. So basically, IKEA do the same. They build like so many different furnitures built up of like, different pieces. And you can see like that my component of the black door from my house. And like, that's a completely different piece of furniture, right? So IKEA do exactly the same. Reusing and sharing, you get so much more. So yeah, welcome to Bit Harmony. Bit has been around for about 7 years, but Bit Harmony, the new version, is about 7 months. It's still in beta because we're still improving things. We've got basically Node and most JavaScript frameworks. So I'm going to say Node, React. We have Angular support now as well. We've got web components with lit elements, and we've got so much more coming. So do stay tuned for more of that. And basically what you want to do is share components across applications, right? You want to build micro front ends. You want to build design systems. Maybe you want to build component libraries. If you're trying to solve any of these problems, I encourage you to check out Bit because it will help you seriously. And yeah, like, there's your components. They're shared in the cloud, and you can basically like, use them into your different repos just by installing it with Yarn, installing with NPM, however you want to install it in a Next.js application, a Gatsby application, in whatever application you want. Share front end, back end modules with Bit. Once it's JavaScript, you can share it. And yeah, like this is the entity product component that I was talking about that I can share with the back end and say, these are basically the props and types that I want to share. So you can share that, and you can see like all the mocks that you can kind of create to show different products as well. And are you ready for it? Like, are you ready to work with Bit? Seriously, I'm very excited about it. Let's start building with Bit so you can build things like this. This is my application that I built. It's a demo project. It's a shoe store, so you can go and buy shoes. Actually, you can't buy shoes, but because the shop now button doesn't do anything yet. But yeah, you can see I use that component highlighter here to see that Learn Bit React Base UI is the headers coming from there. Everything else is coming from other places, and you can play around with it and you can see it for yourself. All you got to do is go to bit.dev. bit.dev/learn-bit-react. You'll see all the demo projects there. There's an e-commerce scope. There's the base UI scope, the design scope. There's the shoe store, the sports store, the electronics store. on the Perfume store. So check them out. And you can also see the link to the GitHub repos. You can actually see that they're all in separate repos and all like working together, like kind of like mini micro front ends. And it's kind of cool. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much. My name is Debbie O'Brien, and you can follow me, Debs_O'Brien on Twitter. If you have any questions, especially about Bit, just reach out on Twitter, reach out anywhere. I'm always available. I've got a YouTube channel as well. And I'm here to answer any of your questions. So if you have any questions, no matter how big or small, you can ask them now, or you can, tweet me later if you're too scared to ask. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I love the energy.
Thanks.
It was incredible. So we got a few questions. I even got myself some questions. So let's start with the audience, then we can have some chit chat about my questions. So first question from Alvar. So how do you test and develop the components?
Yeah, so you basically write tests in a test file like you would do in any component, your test file or spec file, but you have it in the UI open. So you can actually just click on the UI and you can open it and see it, or you can run in the command line if you're a command line person and you prefer to run bit test, and you can run the bit test watch and you can have them watching so that you can see it. I'm a UI person, so I like to have the UI open and it all goes red and I see all the errors and then I fix it as I go along, right? But you might want to do that in the console and you can do that too as well.
Thank you. Question from Vaibhav. So how can we connect or share props between components?
So remember, everything could be a component. So if you wanted to share just a component as like a type, right? You can just share that as your types, as your props, and you can share those between components. You can make everything a component. So we've got a component template generator there. You can go to bit create a component. You can create that component, and then you can just install it. When you're installing the component, we don't use relative links, right? We use like import and then from the @ from where it's based. And that makes sure that then if you move that somewhere else, you're not going to break everything, etc. But you can share anything. So yeah, you can just share it as a component.
Perfect. Akanem is asking, is it possible to batch components update or rollback so that a team can roll back a group of components instead of just one at a time?
Ooh, that's a great question. I've never had to roll back. Can we roll back batch? I mean, you could, because you can basically just go in and modify the workspace JSON and just like you would a package JSON, modify and then and then just export. But it all depends, because it depends on what you're trying to do, right? Because you've got the product card component might be using certain versions. So it's you're rolling back the product card and not the button, because the button, you'd have to roll back the button up. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay. Another question. Can you show the code for the shoe website you build?
Yeah. So the code, what do you mean show? As in show now, or show?
I guess maybe share a link.
I can share a link in the chat, in the YouTube chat. So basically, I have it on the GitHub under Team Bit, and I think it's called demos. No, I call it. What did I call it? I never remember these things. Team Bit demos, I think it's called. I created a new org for it because, well, if you go to basically bit.dev, I'm kind of doing this as I'm talking. Learn Bit React. There's a link on the README, because I like READMEs, because then I remember where to go. So that will take you to the repos, the GitHub repos of each one. And then you can basically, but you can also, there's a code button. It's very hard to see. I always tell them that it's got those two brackets, right? And basically that means the code is there. So you can actually see the code of the component at all times on the bit.dev website. But obviously opening those code files is easier in VS Code, right? So it's easier to and you can also just import this whole repo, and there's instructions on how to do it. If you want to take it all, it's all completely open source. So I kind of encourage everyone to just play around with everything and just have fun. Let me take the shoe store, and I'll put the link in the YouTube chat. And yeah, that answers that question, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Jax here is saying that he used the previous version before Harmony, and he's asking if Bit Harmony is fully ready now.
I think I shared the wrong link there for some reason.
Okay.
Copy the wrong link, sorry. Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, for sure. If you want, you can just share the link after the talk. It's also great.
No, I got it. It's in there.
Okay.
It's in there.
Awesome. Thank you. So he's asking. He mentioned that he had an experience with the previous version of Bit, and asking if Bit Harmony is fully ready now.
I don't think any technology is ever fully ready because everything is always evolving. So yes, if you're developing in React, it's very much, I would call, fully ready. If you're developing in Angular, it's almost fully ready. We're still working on a couple of bugs to try and fix. If you're a Vue developer, we're not ready. So it depends on what you're building, but definitely for React. But there are more things coming. So it's constantly being worked on and constantly being improved. So yeah, stay tuned for more cool things coming.
Yeah, I also saw that like a month ago or so, you had a tweet about adding Tailwind support, right? For Bit.
Yeah, so Tailwind support. I haven't actually put Tailwind in because I'm so now involved in React components and, and things, and playing with CSS and GS and stuff like that. It's all, but yeah, there's a lot of kind of work being done around, using like, TS configs as well, and Webpack configs and all that kind of stuff too.
Another question is how the developer using the component know what are the props accepted by the component.
Yeah, so I'm actually using TypeScript for most of my components, which makes it very easy because you just like kind of hover above it and it tells you absolutely everything. And it doesn't allow you to make any mistakes. Like you try and put another prop in, it's just going to say you can't. If you're not using TypeScript, then, you probably can make mistakes because that's JavaScript. So then you got to write better tests, I guess, But there are the list of props underneath the component, but TypeScript definitely will save your life, even just for using props, for sure.
Yeah, +1 for using TypeScript. Once you go there, you can never go back.
I know, right? And it took me 3 years to go there. I was refusing for 3 years. I was like, no, I'm just JavaScript. And now I kind of like, yes, actually, you know what? TypeScript is better.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I was like very much gatekeeping JavaScript, and then once I released it, I discovered a whole new world. So I have my own question now. So it will give the people here some time to think about more questions. So what are the trade-offs between building a reusable component rather than just a component that is dedicated to my app and my specific use case?
Yeah, so you can basically very easily over-engineer things, and you have to be able to draw the line, right? Because you can make and a product card is a great example, right? You can make the be-all product card that will accept every single product under the sun, and it can just get a bit crazy. So you have to kind of think like, hang on, well, let's separate those and maybe you can have two different product cards, but maybe it's a product card specific to one specific team. So I've done a project like where the shoe card is specific to the shoe store team, and then the e-commerce one has that more generic product card that most teams would use. But if they want something specific, then they should extend on that. And the same with the entity components, right? I have the entity component for the product card, but then I extend it in the shoe star. So I'm actually using it and then extending it as opposed to duplicating it. So yeah, but don't over-engineer. Think about things and build as you go along. You can always extend it later. You can always add to it, and you can always, as you need it, like add more to it, or put something else.
Yeah, I think yes, the key is really not over-engineering it, because it's really sloppy. Once you start building reusable components, then you can easily go over-engineering stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you. And how do you manage like these components in terms of GitHub repositories or Git repositories? Is it monorepo, or one repo per one component?
So it's one repo per team. So I've split it up into teams. Okay, this is a demo project, so it's Tebi's team is every team, right? Because I'm the only developer advocate, so it's just me. But imagine, right? We've got to imagine. But basically, you want to have the design team would be in charge of design. So they're in one repo, and they're responsible for theirs. They export their components when their components are ready. The base UI team have their one. The shoe store have their one. The e-commerce. So I've got lots of multi-repos. However, if you want to build everything in one long mono-repo, you could also do that. So the choice is yours. It depends on how big your team is, how you want to work, what's more convenient for you. And you can basically also work in one kind of mono-repo and export to different scopes as well. So the choice is yours, but depends on what's easier. I mean, Depends on how big
Yeah.
your team is as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And last question from my side is about peer dependencies. Like if all my components use React query, for example, or even React. So how do we make sure that they use the same dependencies rather than bundling up many different versions of the same dependencies?
Yeah, so everything is done in your component. You will get like your package JSON per component that's built for you. Bit does all that for you, so you don't have to manage package JSONs or anything like that. So when you export your component, it's actually going to decide, Bit will decide if your component is a dev dependency, a peer dependency, based on what's how your component is created, right? So if you're using something in the documentation file, then that's like a dev dependency because you don't need it at kind of like, production end. For peer dependencies, you basically put in the peer dependency, and then normally like it's up to the actual main app to just say, hang on, do I have React 16? Do I have React 17? What do I have? And basically like use the one that uses, but if it doesn't have it, we'll install the peer dependency that's that it's needed, right?
Yeah. And last question I saw from the audience is Next.js supported?
Yeah, so Next.js, you basically there's two ways of working with like Next.js or other frameworks. You can build the components in another repo and just import them, install them like using yarn or npm, just like you would any npm package, right? You just install and use. Or you can actually build a workspace in your Next.js application. So you just run like bit init and it sets up the workspace inside your Next application. And then you have your components that are now tied to your app. Again, that's up to you because now you've got all these components tied to an application. So obviously, if that makes it easier for you, if I was doing my website, maybe I might build that way, or I might actually take them out, build them somewhere else and just install them in the Next.js application, because then I can use them in another application much easier. Even though I can still use them from the Next.js application somewhere else, it just kind of is a bit messy because they're tied to that application, right? But it's up to you.
Okay, great. So Debbie, thank you very much for coming and dedicating the time. It was a blast. You can also check out all the amazing comments that you received on YouTube.
Cool. Thank you everyone for watching. And if anyone else has any other questions, seriously, just reach out on Twitter. I'm happy to, help you out with any doubts you have. And we also have a community Slack channel. If you want to, if you're testing out Bit and you have any problems, just let us know. We're always happy to help. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. The next speaker for today is DevRel at Snyk, and he also is an O'Reilly author and a Docker security master, and he has a great Yoda hat. So please make some noise to Liran from Snyk.
Hey everyone. That was
How's it going?
It's going great. It's like I was just thinking it was like a beach day today. So it's like beach in the morning, meetups in the evening. That's kind of like the way that we roll.
Yeah, definitely. I was hiking this morning and then get ready with the right mindset to this event.
Nice. Well, Debbie's talk was amazing about the components and the entire energy issues. I was thinking I'm a fast speaker, but now I need to check my pace around with Debbie.
Yeah, definitely. We all have something to learn from the energies of the last talk.
For sure.
So Liran, good luck with your talk. And everyone who is watching, make sure to write down your questions. Liran would be happy to answer them all. And let's do it. Let's roll. Good luck.
All right, let's go. Hey, everyone. Thank you for the welcoming notes in the chat. This is exactly the vibe and the atmosphere that we need. And hopefully you liked the whole intro slide. This is how to build communities, how to grow them. And I was thinking, what kind of theme, what kind of message do we want to talk about? And there's going to be a lot of analogies related to gardening and flowers, because hey, you need to kind of grow them as well, and we'll get to that. But yeah, so a short intro about myself. Thank you for coming to this meetup and session in general. I am a developer advocate at Snyk. Also recently a GitHub star, working on different security-related projects. That note about Docker was a funny one. I've been doing a lot of research in that area and Node.js as well. It's how to build containerization apps in Node.js in a secure way and all of those kind of things. And this is basically what I do at Snyk, which is basically to help developers build their applications securely, whatever language and programming kind of like stack they're using. So that's me. Come say hi on Twitter. But really, the question is more about you, right? Everyone here, take a moment to reflect on this. Take a second. I'm gonna look into the chat comment and really want to ask you, why are you here for this talk? Why is it interesting for you to grow your communities, to build a community, to work on an open source project, which is, by the way, very, very brave of you to do. This is hard. Maintainers on open source burnout is a real thing. It's really hard. So, happy that everyone are here thinking about growing and building communities. But think about, why are you here? I have some ideas. One of them is you probably want to turn your project from having 0 stars to having 72 million stars. There's no shame in that. That's kind of like, that's kind of like the currency of open source recognition. And, that kind of like makes sense. Hey, there's a community around it. There are people using it. And I think that's kind of the core thing about building with open source and also growing a community around the project. That basically, 72 million, or if you have 100 stars or whatever, that basically means someone appreciates the work that you've done to build a project. Most probably they're using it or have used it at one point, in time. So to me, that is way, way deep. I've been doing a lot of open source activity since I was a kid. Like I was on Linux, a mailing list newsletters when, that was, back in like the 1990s, whatever. That makes me sound a little bit old, which I think I'm not. So, but we'll skip right through that. But anyway, what I'm thinking is, that really, the work on open source really hits me in the feel, in that sense that it's not just someone that you've kind of like using your project, but you've actually helped someone else, right? You have helped someone else do their job, I don't know, run their hobbies, whatever they've done with your project, depending on what it is, what you're building. But that is really deep. That is you basically connecting with other people, over this cyberspace thing with your code. You have basically built something for someone else, and that's amazing. So let's talk about, all of those things, right? Essentially, if this talk is about how do you build communities for open source projects, we need to understand that communities are people. And sometimes it's not that very obvious. Like sometimes communities for you is, a Twitter hashtag or whatever, a mailing list, a newsletter, going into, a meetup or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not just those stars or those clicks or those likes or whatever that's happening, over social media, over the cyberspace, but rather the fact that these, at the end of the day, are people. And how do you reach people? How do you grow friends? How do you grow family? How do you keep those connections? How do you create relationships? If you think about it in that way, this is the essential thing. This is really everything you need to know. So I'll share some of the examples from my open source projects, which, some are, more popular, some are less popular, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'll share some of the learnings that I have learned, what to do and how to help my projects, I'm not trying to grow communities, but rather be a little bit more helpful and nice when people interact with them. What I mean by that is, I'm a fan of, we haven't touched on that yet in the intros, but I'm a fan of command line applications. Like I will write a lot about, different sorts of APIs and integrations and command line things that you could do, with Node.js and build those CLIs. So I've built a CLI called is website vulnerable. This is the whole thing. You could run npx right now is website vulnerable, with dash between the words. And what it does, if you give it a website, is it goes to the website, it scans it, see what JavaScript versions are on it, what libraries are on it, compares them with the Snyk database, and provides you with a list of potential vulnerabilities from what it could tell from, basically doing this kind of like open box testing where you would, you have no idea what's the package JSON, what are the dependencies that were used to build it just from externally using it. So there's an extent of how great are the results, but it's useful. And it really came as a surprise to me when building this, because this started off as a weekend project. Like I was just doing this to basically write, my own for my own needs. And I was thinking, this could be a cool little command line tool with the APIs and the stuff that we have, got around. But people have went off and started, liking it and opening issues. They have created pull requests to create, a better JSON response, or someone went off and created a GitHub action for it, and others have actually used it in their package JSON dependents like scripts and things like that, so they can use it as a pre-test kind of like hook and things around there. So this is, to me, what I feel is becoming to be a community. So it has now a lot of people using it and maybe storing it. But what's interesting is also the contributors amount, like the amount of people who have actually went off and contributed anything from a typo to basically just giving you, their time and effort to promote code and fix an issue and, translate it, or, anything else, whether how small or how large. But these are them. And so I did not go off to build a CLI and say, hey, I want to grow a community around this CLI, let's build it or something. I've basically started with a project. And I think this is an important thing to say, especially in this talk and in this forum. It's like, you do not have to build a community for every single thing. And you should probably not confuse an audience from a community. So these are two different things. And your goal, I would say, in general, working in the open source is not always around communities. It's basically, starting off with what are those, very old scratching the itch kind of mindset, where you build a tool because you need it, and maybe others need it as well, and that's pretty cool. And if something becomes a community, that's great. Now, why do you want a community in general? Let's just touch about it. A lot of benefits, right? Like if there are more maintainers, more users, more people using the project, whatever I've built, this is website vulnerable CLI thing, they could help me maintain it. They could help me build features around it if I need it. Actually, they could help others, which is pretty cool. This is one of the most amazing things, is where someone from the community helps another person from the community. So someone opens an issue, someone else already replied to it. You can just go off and put a nice heart emoji under comments because they've been so helpful. It's all of those things. It could be probably other reasons that you would have, like maybe you want to create integrations on top of your project for something else, like the GitHub Actions for the CLI was an interesting one, where people would not actually directly update the tool, like they would not create any code related to the tool itself, but have actually made the community itself now this CLI useful as a GitHub action for anyone who's consuming GitHub Actions, which is pretty great. So communities are pretty great for those things. So at this point, you're probably asking, hey, cool, all of those stuff are nice. Where do I start? Let me ask you, I'll kind of flip this question around and try to ask you, if you go to this garden, you visit it for a bit, and you kind of I would say, I don't want to name names here, but it's probably feeling a little bit disorganized, disoriented. You may not exactly know where you could go, where to sit, whatever. It looks a bit messy, and you're not entirely sure what to do next when you visit it. So you probably close the doors or continue to the next garden, whatever you see on your path when you walk, or whatever you were doing. However, probably when you get to an entry in your walking path with the garden, something like this, it's a little bit nicer, right? It's a little bit more welcoming. This is all about, if you wanted to sit, there we go. There's like a trail where I can even see the directions that take me towards where do I sit? Where are the docs? Where is the contribution guidelines? What should I do next? What are the open tasks that I should work on? It's very organized for me to figure out what to do next. And so we'll get to that in a second of kind of the bullet points first. But before that, just I want to say, right, open source projects are kind of like flowers, right? If you stop maintaining those open source projects, they go off and they die. It's not a very nice thing to say. And so people are also like that. We need people to communicate with us, right? The relationship is all about feedback, back and forth. It's about talking. It's about making sure that there's a connection, a real, genuine, honest, empathical connection between a set of people. And so if humans are like that, and we said communities are people, that's kind of like the same thing. And perhaps one thing that I'll dwell about even more is the fact that what you want to make sure of is you are actually maintaining projects, because projects that are not maintained in general, they also like die a very, very sudden death, but it does happen. So let's talk about a bit about, what of the examples that you could use. So some of them sound very obvious, but they take some time, they take some effort. So it's not really always easy to get off and get done. And so what I mean by that is, we have that saying where, your first impression in your interview, makes a lot of significance, right? And so it's the same with open source projects. Like when someone lands on that GitHub repository and they scroll down and they see a README, that's going to make a lot of first impression for them. Like, does it look maintained? Does it have a screenshot? Does it have sections? Where do I start? How do I begin? Do I contribute? Is it open source? What's the license for it? Can I actually use it? All of those kind of things, if they're not there in a very tidy up way and very organized visually, that's going to be not so welcoming for people to just get involved. And so I do not want to put this as a very dogmatic thing where some projects are great even if they have very minimal readmes. But take into account that when people see it, that's kind of like, that's their first impression. So the easier that you can make it for them to figure out what this project is about, what's the scope, how do I use it, how do I install it, how do I get started, whatever, it's very different, what's your actual open source project. It could be a documentation thing or a library or a CLI. So it really depends. But that first impression is super important. Connected to that is, it's connected in the name that I've called it here, badges, but it's not really about a visual thing. This is more about giving people what they need to know about the project before using it and before even contributing to it. And that is, for example, does it have tests, right? So putting a badge that has, it has this and that downloads, it has this and that, passing tests or code coverage is super important, because people might be, I would say, a little bit more frustrated maybe to contribute if there are no tests. By the way, you as a maintainer will probably be frustrated as well if there's going to be a lot of regressions and issues due to the contributions if there are no tests. So all of those things, actually, those badges and whatever you could put around the project would be really helpful for people to understand if they should use it or not. The next thing is, I wrote again, be helpful, but I think this is more about empathy a lot of the time. And so what I mean by that is being empathic and sympathetic. I'm not going to go into the differences there, but it's pretty important. And what I mean by being helpful. So my experiences with projects have been like this. What I would do is there's a whole little help that you could do for new contributors, and that is you open those GitHub templates for issues and pull requests. So you kind of like pre-format them with all the notes and the checkboxes and whatever you expect from users, so it's easier for them to know what you need, plus for you to know to get information when people open issues or pull requests. So this is kind of like getting to be a standard now, and you should probably follow that. But that's a small one. What I actually mean here with being helpful is this is a trick that I've done, and I'm going to share one more, the bigger one almost at the end. But really, before that is what I've usually done with projects that I specifically look for more contributors, like creating some sort of community around them, is the following. I do several things. One is I open an issue, and I do like feature colon, and then what's needed from the feature, and usually it's features and not bug fixes, because people have, I think, more affinity to create new stuff rather than fix your whatever you did wrong. So that's kind of like nicer. So even if I can code the whole thing, even if it's like 2 lines of code for me, if I'm already in the zone, on the flow, I can just do like this, and it's there, and I've like completed my whole project for the whole 2 months that I've planned to work on it. I will not do it. I will hold myself back. I will actually put a ticket out as an issue. I will document what I expected to do. I will give all the pointers I can to actually go off and implement it. So like whoever comes in will just read it, take it, and they can work on it. That's it. They have everything they needed, expectation, everything is there. This is really helpful. I've seen a lot of people just jump on those issues to actually see it. And so this is one thing that I would do. The other thing is you could actually, we'll get to that also a bit in a sec after these slides, and it's connected, but that is before that as well. You could actually prepare some labels, like say, good first issue, or like a security label, or whatever makes sense. But you could actually help people figure out if there's something that they have more affinity to, more passion to actually doing. You actually label the projects in that way. And I'm saying it's going to be connected to something else, because think Oktoberfest and good first issue, and that's going to be an easy way to also like put the content out there. Next one for us is automation. That's going to be a lifesaver for everyone involved in the project, maintainers, contributors, and users, everyone. The more you can automate on the project, the best for everyone. That means you need to have solid tests. You need to have solid, I'm going to say this with an asterisk and say, solid, maybe a release cycle, but, there's some, some security implications here. But you should have, if you have everything automated, and that's why I said like automate your job away, that means that the project can go off and live without you. And that is exactly what you're trying to do with building communities around your projects. You do not want to be there to push every little change, to merge, to do the bug fixes for like something that happens with the release process or something like that. The more that you could actually automate the whole thing, that means when someone goes off, puts a pull request, they approve it, someone else approves it, or you do it, it gets merged. That is now a new release going off. No one else needs to kind of like do hand holding or do anything else to kind of like promote it as a new deployment, as a new release for this library or whatever the project is. That is super important, because it's beyond automating and giving people the autonomy to do it. It's beyond that. Think about it. That means they are feeling a lot more involved in the project. This is their responsibility. This is like a shared responsibility for these contributors who have actually pushed something and put it out there. And that would be an amazing feeling for me if I go into a project and I know that people are, trusting me to actually go off and be able to, I don't need them. I could just go off and contribute whatever code I need, and that's it. If it gets merged and everything, it gets off to the wild, to the world, whatever that library is all about, or that open source project. So these are really some kind of like pillars to how to get started, from the foundations to some I think nicer stuff. If you think about it a lot, this is about being very welcoming, sense of I don't want to say guardrails, but welcoming foundations of how people would actually be very successful in your project. So another aspect of that, which I didn't add here, is whether you are able to also be able to take a more proactive approach when you're interacting with those people. What I mean by that is really, if you think about it, if someone, for me, I've almost done it in every time in my open source project. When I have an external contributor, what I would do is the first time they open an issue or a pull request, I would immediately put like those love emojis, or like the thumbs up or whatever. I will say thank you a ton, and all of those things. I will recognize them for their work. I would actually go a little bit depending on the situation, but even a little bit deeper into like the situation. And if someone like opened something on the weekend, or I see like I'm connected to these things. Like for me, it's like I would probably get a notification on the weekend, but if I know it's the weekend for them as well, and they say like, hey, I want to work on this issue, I will actually go in and say, thank you so much. I know it's your weekend, your family, your health is like, takes precedence over everything. Prioritize that. And, you can get back to this next week. So, this is yours to continue it. And so, being a little bit more empathic, helpful, understanding, I think that really creates a whole sense of you caring about other people. And, it's genuine, right? Like, I'm not saying this, or people are not understanding this in any other kind of way. It's just us, working together in a constructive manner. So all of that. And I want to add something else, because this is probably touching different people in different aspects of the open source projects they work on. And, not all open source projects are code. And I wanted to make that kind of like clear, right? Like you may have some libraries, some apps, some whatever, but not all of those projects are code. Some of them are best practices. Some of them are just lists, like awesome lists that you want to maintain for, some like awesome UI components for Bit if you wanted to do something, an inspiration after Debbie's talk here. So those kind of communities are different. So you don't really need or have those automations and tests or whatever, and it's not that critical, or maybe, I don't know, we do it differently. So let's take a look about what kind of a sort of projects that would be. So I've created this, I've told you I'm like a CLI fan, I'm a fanatic for CLIs. So I've built this, I think, a very comprehensive kind of repository for how do you build command line applications with Node.js and all the best practices that you could think of. And I basically put all of my thoughts, all of the practices I've learned through time, building those CLIs myself in there. And it's really all about here, not really the code changes or new releases that we need to push off and stuff like that, but rather about the community that maintains it. So for me, for example, the community is those who helped translate it. And I needed to figure that out. Like, it's not that obvious that, you go off, you create this, Node CLI best practices things, and you're thinking, hey, maybe that should be, translated to German or whatever. I have no idea. Like, I didn't think about it like that, but someone came in and was like, hey, maybe help, translate it. And they opened an issue. And then I went off and created, forgot the name of that tool, but there's like a tool that helps you synchronize the translation between the GitHub repository, the commit head and whatever they have on that tool. And it's a pretty cool thing to add. So it became to be a content translation community, and now it even supports different languages. Like, that content is now translated to other people and made more accessible and easier for them to work with it. And it's not even that. There's been content curators. Like, there are people who are saying, hey, I think this is a best practice that we should have. Or, by the way, some people, when you create a community, they're not all going to agree with you and say, of course, whatever Liran says, that's going to be, the absolute truth. No, not so much. People have different perspectives. And I think that is a muscle you have to train as well. And that is, you may not disagree sometimes with people, and that's okay. Like, you should know what are your boundaries, but you should know that people will not think the same as you. People will have different perspectives. And if you really want to build a welcoming community for whatever you're building, you need to be able to honestly deal, and when I'm saying deal, I mean accept really these kind of contributions and these kinds of perspectives. Sometimes I would go off and merge some commits and pull requests who, if I knew that if I were going to push this pull request, I would add tests to it and I would also fix something else. But for me to be able to empower someone else who is helping me with the project, I will not be as rigid. I will say, hey, this looks amazing. Thanks. I think you could add another test and fix something else, but we can do it in another pull request. And for them, that's very welcoming. Like, they, think of you if you wanted to be part of like a really big project like the React and the Angular, the Node.js and stuff. What you really want to do is get that pull request out, right? Like, make someone merge it, and that is part of a bigger thing, right? So you should really put yourself in those kind of like shoes and say, hey, I want to empower someone to be a constructive member of this community. It's okay if they have different levels of expectations or the way that they approach things, and not everything has to be super perfect. Remember, this is about progress, it's about enabling, about creating a moving thing, right? That open source are in motion. So think about it in those terms, and really recognizing these efforts by other people. Like, there are different GitHub integrations / bots, whatever, all of those NPM contributors and things like that. They would populate the READMEs with those who have contributed to your project, which is amazing. Like, why not? Why would you not want to recognize the efforts of everyone involved in the project? The more you have, that's actually even better. So all of this is pretty cool, and I loved doing all of those kind of like different ways of recognizing people and get them. So how do you get people involved, which is a different aspect of things. So at the very first, some of this might not be very new, and like that's not going to be a surprise where I'm saying hey, go to user groups, meetups, conferences, whatever, and do something, tell the world about your project. It doesn't sound like a surprise, but it's a mandatory thing. Like, obviously, if you've created something and you want others to know about it, you kind of need to tell them about it. And there's no other way than, telling them about it, they would know. So, this is not about you putting, I don't know, SEO assets or funded ad, whatever. Like, no one does that, or, they did not sign up to build open source projects for that. So what you really have to do is do the grind work, right? Like, if you've built a cool library, cool best practices, put up a presentation about it, tweet about it, tell the community about it, whatever the user groups here. That's why I use user group. That's a very generic and abstract thing. This can be Twitter, this can be Reddit, LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups. There are people, also remember, people are like different people communicate on different mediums. So like, don't feel you're spamming. These people just like on Facebook may not even go to Twitter. So like, it's a different audience altogether. These are the online stuff, right? Put it on Dev2, put a blog post out with daily.dev, maybe getting your blog post in it. And that is, by the way, something that I've seen very helpful for my projects. Like I worked on a different project we didn't talk about here, like Logfile Lint. It's based on a security research that I've done. And what I did actually is created a blog post first out of that research that I've done on why is that even a problem? Like why log files could be a security issue. And so there's the whole tool, at the end of it, which is what you would want to use. But before that, like, why would I even want to use that? And if that gets, good attention, like it gets featured on newsletters and people share it and, they reference it from different talks, that kind of like get the ball rolling for you. And that's what I mean by creating supporting content. Think about getting, doing not like just telling about it to someone, but actually doing talks about it, doing hackathons, doing blog posts, all of those things. Getting it featured in other newsletters is a great way as well. Think about the fact that you could create features and bags in advance, which is what we talked on, few earlier slides, and that is, how do you get people to get involved? Well, you make it easier for them. You basically move the barrier to entry to zero, not zero, actually, sorry, -5. Why? Because they do not need to think on something and say, well, that Node.js project, what is it missing? Does it have an export to JSON? No, you don't need to think about it. You just give them a list of, these are the features that would be really cool. If they like one of them, they can go in, they can figure out how do I do it. They push the code and that's it. They are part of your community now. Think about Oktoberfest. This is happening very, very soon. So think about it. Think, how do you utilize this? Think, how do you promote your project? How is this part of that story? How issues you could create in advance and populate them with a good first issue and Oktoberfest kind of labels to help people out. My biggest secret yet is, it's the biggest secret. Let's see, which one? This is the one, the biggest secret. Okay, it's a bit of a dad joke because the secret is big. Never mind. It's I'm lousy at dad jokes, so that's, if you don't get it, then no worries. This is really it. Make them contributors. That's gonna be super helpful. What I mean by that is, like, honestly, the first person who contributed to whatever you're building, add them as a contributor to the project. Now, the funny story with that is that it I didn't want to say it came back and hunted me. Because that sounds pretty negative. It didn't, but it was a funny take on it. And so I was giving a similar talk, talking about like how to get involved in open source and building successful projects and all of those things. And I was telling them exactly that. I was saying that, hey, if someone gets involved in the project, they put a PR. What I do, I just make them a contributor. If they appreciate the invite and they want to continue, they'll accept it. If they don't, they'll just ignore it. That's fine. Sometimes, depending on the project and the amount of work that I know is expected, I might like just in the PR, I'll actually like ask them if it's okay to send them an invite, really depending on the sizing of things. But this is, think about it, like this is a great invite to officially be recognized as a contributor of the project beyond your pull request. And that is pretty cool. So one time I gave this talk and I said, like, this is the secret that I use. And I remember it's like, a couple of days after this, after giving that talk, someone in the crowd who we talked about one of his projects actually added me as a contributor to one of their projects, just out of the blue. And it's like, okay, looks like you've learned the whole thing. Of course, I had to do a contribution, but this was cool. This was, people are understanding like what it is. And so like, there's like a whole, once you make someone a contributor, there's a whole sense of commitment, accountability, responsibility. You're part of something that's pretty cool. So this is kind of like my tip for you. Of course, don't abuse it and spam people. So this is me and my kind of like experience and chats about open source projects, the way that I kind of like try to run them. And I'm having fun with open source, since, for a long time. So hopefully you are as well, and happy to take on any comments or questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Liran. This was truly inspiring. And let's see some of the questions here. So people started by asking how do you actually grow the community, but at the end of your talk, you already nailed it. So another question is how important it is to have a community on a platform like Slack, Discord for an open source project.
Good question. I have never put any of my related projects into a community building on Slack or Discord. I think it very much depends on what you're building, like the size and the scope of this thing. If you have, a very big idea of, I like you're committed and saying, I'm building the next Kubernetes. I'm building, and by the way, it doesn't have to be that big, but it's like you're passionate about the thing. Like, what is it? You could go off and build something like that. But I think a lot of the times, like, why would you actually need it? Because for a community to also not feel dead is a very, like, it's a very thin line between having 5,000 people on the Slack or Discord, but then like no one is saying anything because like after 2 months, like it's dead. That's like a bad thing for everyone, because like they would come in, expect to be, greeted, be welcome, people help them, but no one is actually, there anymore. So that could have a negative effect. Plus, to be honest, with issue, like, I don't think it serves like any better approach than having something like GitHub issues or discussions, which was released recently. And I like it a lot more. Like that is, well, people are already on GitHub. Like, why would they want to go to Discord or Slack to ask anything else? So I would say if you get to a point where you think your project is super large, like you have a lot of maintainers, this is, a lot of things, maybe you need it because people need more like real-time help or whatever. And you also want to connect people to more than just your project. That is what I would say is key. If it's like integrations, like the whole, cloud native space, like you want to connect people in different things, and it's not just a project, that is where I would say, maybe go off and build something better. Not better, bigger, like a Slack and Discord community.
Yeah, according to our experience as well, getting this Slack organization dead is very easy compared to getting it very active. And as you mentioned, it's a bad sign for the community. So so making it lean, I think it's the best approach.
Yeah. Think a lot, by the way, about how do you actually help people. Like if you have a Discord or Slack, they are not SEO searchable. So if you have a project that people would actually like benefit from, if they have like an error message and they Google it, they'll never find it if it's in like Slack or Discord. But if that is someone like opened an issue and they Google it, they'll find it very quickly. And that is you being very helpful to your users. So there's like a lot to consider whether building those Slack or Discord, and I would completely ignore them at the beginning just because I think they're like not suited for that. And like that is not the way that you grow a community. Plus, like I said, I don't think everything needs a community, and like, sometimes this is like too overrated.
Mm-hmm. And going to the next questions, what are the important metrics we should look at when building an OSS community?
Good one. So there's this company called orbit.love. They are in the space of kind of community building, tracking, metrics, KPIs, developer advocacy kind of things. I think they have a lot of like great tooling. We use them at Snyk, so like I know from like the dashboards and the way that we can like track some of the things. Like it looks pretty great, and they give you some kind of like metrics, like say, hey, these people on Twitter, for example, like have mentioned you for a lot of time. Like these are the repeating users. These are like your heroes, your ambassadors, and that kind of like helps. I think what metrics to put into building an OSS community is a super large discussions because it depends what the project is for. So it's kind of like hard to answer that with like a silver line or like a silver bullet answer. But I would say probably engagement, like that is a very key thing. Like and then you can section engagement based on like whether an engagement is getting stars or an engagement is the amount of commits, or the engagement is the amount of commits, but how many, like distributed by the amount of people. Because for example, if you say just the amount of commits, if it's the same person committing every day, that's not a sign of community. But if it's 50 commits by 50 users, that's like a different story. That's like there's something there that you need to kind of nail. So I don't know, like the whole one answer to this doesn't really exist. It's a bigger, and I love this question, but probably like we need a whole talk around this.
Yeah, maybe next time we will have more time. Yeah, to go deeper on the metrics. And people got very excited about your hat, and they are asking where they can get this hat from.
This is one secret I won't tell you in this meetup, but I'm happy to meet up with you, Vibe Hub. If I butchered that name spelling. But happy to meet with you on drinks and a conference sometime, and we can share stories, war stories about these hats.
Perfect. I would love to hear them as well. So yeah, make sure to invite me.
Will do.
According to your experience, does licensing have any effects on the number of people reaching to your repo?
Great question. I love it because it's such, I think, such an underestimated. People like don't pay too many attention to that. Like, I think one of the best signs to me as like for the growth of open source, and I've been here from the days where open source was bad, was called the virus by people, from different, bigger enterprises, you could imagine. And so I will tell you that I think it matters. But yeah, the biggest sign of the growth of open source has been the permissive licenses. Like, people start off these days with probably MIT or Apache 2 as like the default go-to licenses, because that's what everyone are doing, and that's kind of like the permissive models. I would say that if there are reasons that you do not want to build your projects on those particular licenses, that's probably requires a deeper understanding as to why, like what's your model around it. For me, a lot of the times is scratching your itch, right? This is, I want to build something that I need, and I'm going to put it out there. And if someone want to take the whole thing, rename it, and add one other thing and like fork it and say that this is their own, that's fine with me. I don't mind it. So if you have a different kind of like model, like this is part of your business model, this has to be GPL, whatever, you want to retain rights and you want to maintain the openness of the community and no one kind of like stealing patents or whatever that's going on, that's a whole different thing. And so I would give you the answer that you could go back and Google the React license issue and see that when React had a problematic license, the React, the Vue library, that had a problematic license at time, it really annoyed the developers and open source community advocates, and they ended up kind of like changing their license. But this makes sense, and like in the sense of the context of like this is React by Facebook, and people had like worries and concerns like, hey, what would happen if I use it and I build something that I need to like have patent issues, or like am I going to get sued? So if you're building something at that scale, you probably want to hear advice from a lawyer and not from me. So I appreciate the question, but I think if you're going with permissive licenses, people will not have any issue in general. Plus, if they do, they will open an issue and you can find out about it and discuss it with them.
Perfect. Alvar is asking for tips for communities that are crowdsourced.
I don't know. I need help there. What does it actually mean, communities that are crowdsourced?
I think earlier to this comment, he mentioned that he is building a wiki that is open sourced, but the content is crowdsourced.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it applies. It reminds me of like the Node.js CLI best practices repo that I was sharing, because that was a lot like the thing that I put out there. But at the same time, if I like really wanted to like create something else, I could follow my own tips here and my advice and like put sections of things and let the community like crowdsource the content and curate it for me. So to me, a lot of it from what I was saying is really much the same. I think probably the tips there would be, how do you get the project, like not how do you get people involved, because all the rest of what I said I think applies, but rather the real question or the challenge is how do you get people know about that, to like the question about reaching out to them, and that is something to figure out.
I think also one of the key insights from your talk for me personally was that open source is not only code. Like you mentioned this awesome lists and then your best practices repo. So I think many developers, when they think about open source, they think immediately about code and about JavaScript and whatnot, and it can be as simple as content, not just code.
For sure.
Yeah. So this was a key insights for me. I have a question. If you can elaborate a little bit about the difference between audience and community, what are the differences between them?
Yeah. I would say it. it really comes down to the fact of whether people are interested in whatever like your project is about, your product. Let's put it in the terms of product. Are they interested in it? And the other one is, are they like interested to a level where they are interested to engage and like take a proactive action? And so, for example, if I'm building, this is website vulnerable things CLI, I know there's an audience for it, right? Like there's a lot of DevOps people, DevSecOps, security people, devs who are security champions who would say, hey, that's a pretty cool project. Let's use it in our CIs and whatever. And I will, pen testers might use it to figure out, what libraries are running on the project and if there have vulnerabilities. So this is an audience, right? Like there are specific roles and people and like job descriptions who would benefit from using the project. We could apply that to anything else, right? To React, to the daily dev and all of those things. So this is an audience. A community, I would say, is people who are probably from that audience, but they actually want to be proactively involved. Like they say, hey, this website vulnerable is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and create a GitHub action for it, integration. Let's do a Circle CI integration for it. Let's do that. They actually go off and they do things. How do you find out about communities? The best way or evidence to figure out that you have a community around your project is when you're starting to see people posting about it in different areas. Like they would post on Twitter and say, hey, I've used this CLI thing and I had an issue. Could someone help me resolve it? They will post it on Stack Overflow. They will do all of those kind of things. They will go into, I don't know, like if it's a Cypress related plugin, they might create a Cypress plugin to it and it will be on the Cypress marketplace. Cypress is a testing framework thing for JavaScript. So this is where, and the moment that other people actually reply to them and help them and tell them, hey, so yeah, this is how you fix it, and they give them links, this is now a community. This is like people interested in work related to your project, and they've like kind of went off from like passive listeners, this is the audience part, like passive, hey, this is a cool tool, to I'm actually using it. This is, very pivotal thing in the way that I do day-to-day, whatever job that I do.
I see. Thank you very much. And my last question is, how do you say no to the community?
How do you say no to anyone, basically?
Yeah, basically, yes. Yeah.
I don't know. That's like a very context related question. That is like no on what? I don't know. It depends. I think if you base your community and your like engagement with other people, and that, by the way, could be your peers, your colleagues, whatever, on on actionable things, that kind of like steers the discussion from your perspective of how things should work to rather what is the action that's coming out of it. And so I would always make those kind of discussions around, what are we gaining from it? What's the action for it, right? Like, let's talk about this thing. So I would be less worried or like less wanting to steer the discussion towards saying, I do not believe in writing tests like that, to let's build tests that actually are helpful, and like let's follow some practices, and maybe I disagree with them, but as long as they're like helping the project in general, this is great. This is like not just me. So I don't know, it depends what is no. Sometimes it's about the scope of the project. Like some people might go on and say, hey, let's add his website vulnerable thing to do export in XML. So for example, for me, I wouldn't say like no, but I would say like, hey, pretty cool. Like if you want it, so like now it depends, right? If I really am happy with that, but I don't want to work on it or prioritize it, I would say I'm happy to get a pull request about it. And if you want to shoot it out, I'll merge it. Or if I don't think that it's a good idea to put it in the project, I could just say, my scope of the project is only this and that, the X and Y's. And this would be a great, extra NPM helper library, something, whatever. I'm happy to link to it from the README or make it transparent and aware, but I do not want to add it. And I would be a bit more helpful in the way that I answer that. Like I would say, I do not want to add it to the project because it's more maintenance for me. And right now it's a small project with just me and maybe someone else. And that's kind of like the reason why I do not want to extend the project's scope. So I would try to be kind of nice in the way that I communicate those things, because it's like Twitter and GitHub. Like a lot could sound different on just writing and reading stuff. And well, there's like a real genuine kind of like answer behind the scene. So like I'll try to elaborate on this.
Yeah.
Great question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so Liran, it was a blast. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, and everyone as well. Have a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So, everyone, thank you all for coming. We are about to end another incredible event. And before we do that, you already know that we give away an epic prize at the end of every monthly dev. And today, we are going to give an Oculus Quest 2. So, if you manage to get inside the raffle throughout the past month, let's see who win. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else. So please give me the drum rolls. We are about to announce, and the lucky winner is Rial. Rial, we will reach you out through email to send you the instructions on how you can claim the prize and how you can get this Oculus Quest 2 for free. And congratulations. And with that said, this was the last competition that we held for the time being. So thank you all for taking part in this competition and in these raffles. And stay tuned for the upcoming raffles and competition that we will have. We will update everything on Twitter, so make sure to subscribe and follow us there. It's daily.dev. And until the next time, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss the upcoming events. And as always, everything is recorded so you can hear it in your free time. And yeah, see you again in 1 month. Thank you all for coming. Bye-bye.